The girl was face down in the gully when I found her, close enough to the outpost fence that the morning patrol should have seen her and hadn't. I climbed down the bank before I was fully awake, still holding my coffee, and turned her over. Kethani. Young. Skin was the color of lavender left too long in the sun, that dry, faded purple the canyon dust turns everything. And her eyes, when they opened, were amber and enormous, and said nothing at all. No crying. She looked at me the way a hurt animal looks at the first thing it sees. Measuring whether I was the end or a pause in the end, I said, in the 3 words of Kethani I knew, "You're safe." Still, she didn't answer. She didn't pull away when I lifted her. I'd been running the Halvath Canyon Outpost resupply station for 11 years by then. 600 square meters of red rock and corrugated panels, a fuel depot, a water reclamation unit, and a small office where I processed frontier charter paperwork for every soul who passed through the contested belt between the inner settlements and the deep range. I knew every form in the frontier municipal code. That fact matters. I'll come back to it. I got Sarah. I named her that inside my own head within the first hour, because the Kethani custom is to give a temporary use name when the real name isn't offered, and I needed something to think at her. I got her into the station, cleaned the gully cuts on her arms, and found out, through patient gestures and the fragment of her language I had, that she'd been in the gully for 2 days. Family's caravan had been stopped on the south track. She'd run. I knew what stopped caravans on the south track. Everyone on the frontier knew. The Sanctum had been operating in the contested belt for 8 months by that point, and the Inquisitors were efficient, the way only true believers are efficient. They had a doctrine. I'd read it, because I read everything that f's the outpost's legal standing, that unregistered Kethani miners were spiritually unmoored souls requiring Sanctum stewardship. In practice, that meant they took the children and placed them in Sanctum settlements, and the families either converted or lost them permanently. The frontier charter was silent on religious jurisdiction over non-human miners. The Sanctum had lawyers who'd made sure of that silence. Sarah ate half a ration brick and fell asleep on my spare cot with her knees pulled to her chest and both hands wrapped around the small carved figurine she'd kept in her jacket pocket. Bone white, the shape of something I couldn't identify, worn smooth from handling. I watched her sleep for a few minutes, and then went to my office and pulled up the Frontier Municipal Code. The Sanctum Inquisitors arrived at 10 in the morning. 2 of them, in the gray coats with the copper thread trim that meant enforcement rank, not just ministry. The taller one had a document case, and the expression of a man who had done this many times and found it went smoothly. "We're looking for a Kethani miner," he said. "Caravan seizure on the south track 2 days past. 1 child unaccounted for. Lots of children passed through," I said. "This one would have been alone. Lavender coloring. Small. I'd need to see your jurisdictional authority for the contested belt." He produced it from the document case. It was in order. I read every word slowly, took my time, and handed it back. "Under Frontier Charter Section 41, I said, "a municipal dependency filing by a registered outpost operator supersedes interim custody claims while the filing is under administrative review. Filed this morning." I handed him the form. It was a municipal dependency registration, a form that existed specifically for human children found, abandoned at frontier stations, to establish temporary legal guardianship while family status was investigated. It was not designed for Kethani children. Nothing in the code said it couldn't apply to them either, because the code used the word minor throughout and had never specified species. The Inquisitor looked at the form. He looked at me. "This is a human administrative form," he said. "The Frontier Municipal Code uses the word minor," I said. "I've listed the child's species correctly in Section 3. The form is complete, witnessed, and timestamped. You're welcome to challenge it. The review period is 14 standard days, and the child remains in my custody pending outcome." He left. I knew he'd be back. Sarah was awake when I came inside. She'd found the water and drunk most of it and was sitting on the edge of the cot, turning the bone figurine over in her fingers. When I came in, she looked up, and her expression had shifted from that measuring animal stillness to something else. Not trust yet, but the beginning of a question about whether trust was possible. I sat on the floor across from her because it was lower than the cot, and I didn't want to be the tall thing standing over her. I pointed at her figurine and raised my eyebrows. She looked at it and said one word in Kethani that I didn't know. I pulled out my translation unit, and she said it again into the pickup. The unit thought for a moment and returned. Keeper, keeper. I nodded. I didn't know if it was a noun or a name for the carved thing or a word for a person. It didn't matter. I pointed at myself and said the same word back badly, with a human throat that couldn't manage the tonal depth. She made a sound that might have been a correction, or might have been something like a laugh. The senior inquisitor arrived at 3 in the afternoon. He'd brought a Frontier Sanctum legal advocate and a new document, a formful challenge to the dependency filing, citing a Sanctum covenant that predated the Frontier Municipal Code by 60 years. It was, I had to admit, a better argument than I'd expected. I told them I'd need to review the covenant document and they could return tomorrow morning. The child, the senior inquisitor began, remains in my custody during administrative review, I said. Frontier Charter, Section 41. You have the form number. Come back tomorrow. Spent the night reading the Sanctum Covenant and the Frontier Charter and 300 years of contested belt case precedent. Sarah slept. I did not. What I found at 2 in the morning was a footnote in a 2019 charter amendment. The Sanctum Covenant's preemption clause applied only to settlements within Sanctum-declared spiritual territories. The Halvath Canyon Outpost was registered as a frontier municipal station, not a settlement. The Covenant's jurisdiction didn't reach here. The dependency filing held. I don't think I'd have caught it if I hadn't spent 11 years doing nothing but frontier charter paperwork, corrugated office in the red dust. I don't think anyone else at this outpost, if there had been anyone else, would have known which footnote to for. That's not pride. That's just the plain fact of what 11 years of boredom will do for you, when it turns out to matter. In the morning the inquisitors came back, the senior one, with the advocate, and 2 more gray coats behind them. I handed them a printed summary of the relevant charter language, the covenant jurisdiction clause, and the footnote, 3 pages total, stapled. The advocate read it. He read it again. He said something quietly to the senior inquisitor that I didn't catch. The senior inquisitor looked at me for a long moment. You understand, he said, that this is a temporary measure. The review will conclude. I understand that, I said. I'll file the appropriate documentation at each stage. You're welcome to challenge at each stage. They left. Sarah was standing just inside the doorway. I didn't know how long she'd been there. She was holding the bone figurine in both hands and watching the gray coats walk away through the dust and the morning light. When they were gone, she looked up at me. I said the word again, the Kethani one she'd taught me, the one that meant keeper. Something like it. She said it back. Correctly, pointing at me. The 14-day review concluded in my favor. Sanctum filed 2 additional challenges over the following months. Both were dismissed. I found a Kethani community advocate in the inner settlements, and Sarah's mother, who had been released when the covenant jurisdiction argument spread to the other contested belt stations, reached us by the end of the dry season, stood in the outpost yard, and watched Sarah walk to her mother, the bone figurine still in her jacket pocket. The mother held her for a long time without letting go. When she finally straightened and looked at me, she said something in Kethani that my translation unit rendered as teams. The one who kept. I went back inside and finished my coffee. The outpost was quiet. The forms on my desk were the same forms they always were, and the red dust came through the gaps in the panels, the same way it always had. Some things you do because they're right. Some things you do because 11 years of learning the footnotes turns out, one morning, to be exactly the right preparation for the problem in front of you. Halvath Canyon Outpost. Municipal Registry Number 7 Alpha 19. Still operating.